Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators have a massive opportunity on the recruiting trail over the next couple of days to really generate some momentum on the recruiting trail. This official visit weekend is just about as loaded as you'll see across the country. Multiple top 100 prospects. You got 3 5-star prospects on campus for this Florida program. Really excited to get into some of my favorite names that will be on campus for this Florida program. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Florida Gator fans who've been consistently rocking with the boys, checking out these recruiting episodes in the middle of the summer. I can't thank you guys enough. There are not many fan bases that follow the recruiting trail like them Florida Gator fans. Y'all know I love talking the recruiting trail. Appreciate the support more than you guys know. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. If we have any breaking commitments over the weekend, we'll be diving into some film, recapping those as well. And without further ado, let's get into this list. And I want to start in the pass catcher area. And I want to kind of highlight what I think could be some momentum for Florida on the recruiting trail. And that is, you look at Florida and what they've done in the wide receiver room during that 2023 season. You saw Ricky Pearsall go first round in the NFL draft. You saw a true freshman in Eugene Wilson take the SEC by storm. And you look at what these high caliber pass catchers are looking for in their schools at the next level. They're looking for development to the NFL draft and opportunities to play early as freshmen. I think Florida checked both of those boxes in 2023 with guys like Eugene Wilson and Ricky Pearsall. And I think the second thing that a lot of these pass catchers are looking for is, hey, who's going to be throwing me the football over the next couple of years? You look at Florida, what they have in their quarterback room, DJ Lagway in the 2024 class, Will Griffin in the 2026 class. It's going to be one of the more talented young quarterback rooms that you see in the country. So I think Florida, from a pass catching standpoint, should be a really attractive destination for some of these top wide receivers and pass catchers. And I want to start with 5-star Caleb Cunningham, who is one of the more fun film studies to get into. You talk about the exact wide receiver that I think Florida is looking for to inject at the high school level. It's this kind of guy. You look at Florida and what they've done in the wide receiver room the last couple of cycles on the recruiting trail. Guys like Eugene Wilson, Ada Mazzell, Tank Hawkins, they are some of the more electric and faster wide receivers that you saw coming out of high school. They haven't really injected that bigger body, that physical X wide receiver. And I think Caleb Cunningham would kind of provide that kind of wide receiver that Florida is looking for. When you look at Caleb Cunningham, he is a phenomenal basketball player, has scored over 1,500 points on the hardwood, 18 points per game. You see those basketball chops manifest so clearly on the football field. You talk about contested catches, the body control, the physicality at the catch point. That's what Caleb Cunningham is going to bring to his next stop at the college football level. There are not many wide receivers that attack the football and make plays on the football like Caleb Cunningham. I think this would be a perfect addition for Florida, not only because Caleb Cunningham's a phenomenal wide receiver. He's a 5-star for a reason, but I think the type of wide receiver that Florida is trying to get in the high school class, and then Caleb Cunningham, certainly checks that box. And another wide receiver that very similar play style to Caleb Cunningham, and I'm sure a very familiar name for the Florida Gator fans, is Cortez Mills. And I think right now, as we sit going into the weekend, you're probably on the outside looking in at Caleb Cunningham. I think you're right in the thick of it for a guy like Cortez Mills. He's in-state in the state of Florida. You look at Cortez Mills, for the Florida Gator fans who follow the recruiting trail, the offseason camps, Cortez Mills has kind of just taken over. This is a guy that is dominating some really good defensive backs during some of these offseason camps. And that's not to say that he hasn't done it Friday nights in the fall. This is a guy that caught over 75 catches for over 1,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, similar to Caleb Cunningham, where Cortez Mills really does thrive is playing the football in the air. And again, Florida doesn't have that kind of wide receiver, at least a young wide receiver like that. They have a lot of electric wide receivers, guys like Eugene Wilson, Ada Mazzell, I think Tank Hawkins. You guys know I'm going to love him. I think they're looking for these kind of wide receivers. I think there's a clear emphasis on these wide receivers. I would love to see either Caleb Cunningham, Cortez Mills, or both join this Florida class, because I think this is exactly what they're looking for in terms of the type of wide receiver. And the last pass catcher I want to talk about is Andrew Olish. And I'm going to make a crazy comp. I get that it's awfully early to put this on this kid. Kind of reminds you of a guy like Kyle Pitts. At 6'5", 215 pounds, it's just hard to find pass catchers with this kind of frame that are as smooth and as athletic as a guy like Andrew Olish. Big time numbers as a junior, over 970 yards, 10 touchdowns. Plays a lot of that jumbo wide receiver that you see a lot of tight ends play at the high school level. And you look at him, projecting him to be a tight end at 6'5", 212. You can routinely get him up to 230 pounds, maintain that athleticism. And when you start talking about Andrew Olish, you start talking about just a matchup nightmare. With this catch radius and frame, if you want to put a defensive back on a guy like Andrew Olish, you're just not going to find many defensive backs that can deal with the frame and physicality that he has. And then you want to put a linebacker, deal with him in the middle of the field, carrying up a seam. Andrew Olish is going to run right by linebackers. I think this is the exact matchup nightmare that you look for at the tight end position. I'm fired up about all three of these guys that are going to be on campus in the pass catching department for the Florida Gators. And again, I hope they can, kind of capitalize on some momentum they have with these pass catchers on the recruiting trail. Moving to the next position I want to talk about, and that is in defensive back room. One, Will Harris. You guys know I was a massive fan of bringing Will Harris in to coach this defensive back room. And then you look at the success that some of these young defensive backs, specifically in the safety room, had for Florida in 2023. I think it's, again, another attractive spot for some of these top safeties to come to. And you look at Trey McNutt, you're not going to find a better safety in the high school ranks than Trey McNutt. He checks off really every single box that you're looking for. You take a look at him on the high school football field, two-way player, elite wide receiver as well. And he's a guy that plays a little cornerback. So he gives you kind of all the things that you're looking for. He can play that center field safety, be that ball hawking safety, a guy that runs a 10-8 in the 100-meter dash, can cover a lot of ground. But with that cornerback background, you can also have him come up into the box and play man coverage on slot wide receivers or tight ends. He has the frame and athleticism to deal with those kind of wide receivers, and he's very physical at the point of attack. You look at Trey McNutt and you look at what you want in these modern day safeties, guys that can do a little bit of everything. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. I think he's shown that athleticism translates to the football field. I think he's a perfect fit in this Austin Armstrong defense for the Florida Gators. The other defensive back I want to talk about, and for the Florida Gator fans who have been listening for really the last couple of years of my takes on the recruiting trail, this is one of these cornerbacks that you already know I love, right? 6'1", 180 pounds. He is extremely smooth. He's extremely long. This is a guy that when you look at the frame, it's hard to find 6'1", 170-pound corner. I mean, he's got to put on some weight. He's got a slender frame. He'll put on the weight. I don't think we're too concerned about that. I'm more focused on the movement patterns that this kid has at 6'1". I mean, he is extremely smooth, breaks on the football exceptionally well, 6 interceptions as a junior. In-state kid from Miami, Florida. I think Florida's certainly in the thick of it for a guy like Ben Hanks Jr. You start looking at the young defensive back room that the Florida Gators are building. Some of the guys we already talked about, Bryce Thornton, Jordan Castell, but then you look at Jakeem Jackson, Kermani McLean. I'm a really big fan of what Florida has coming in the secondary room. I think Ben Hanks certainly adds to that young, youthful, very talented defensive back room for the Florida Gators. The last position I want to talk about is the offensive line. And we kind of know that Billy Napier has a type on the offensive line. He's going after his type this weekend. The first guy I want to talk about, Micah DeBose from Mobile, Alabama. This is a guy that plays tackle at the high school level. I think he plays guard in college. And you look at the type of offensive lineman Billy Napier wants. I think Osiris Torrance he was the guy that Billy Napier wants on these offensive lines, these road grading offensive linemen that are really strong at the point of attack, that can just move defenders off the line of scrimmage with ease. That's Micah DeBose. And I'm not necessarily saying that he can't play tackle, because at 6'5", 315, he does display some really impressive athleticism. Why I like him as a guard is when he is engaged with defenders, when he's operating in that phone booth, that's when he's at his best. I want you to put him in those situations that has the ability to play at his best. And I think that would be kind of in those close quarters at that guard spot. Ultimate road grader in the run game. I think a guy that is exactly what Billy Napier wants on the offensive line. And then the other one I want to talk about is the 5-star offensive lineman Solomon Thomas, who I think gives you some real versatility. This kid is a phenomenal athlete for the size, and he's kind of projected to play on the inside of the offensive line. I think he could certainly play tackle. You don't see many frames and bodies that big who are that smooth and athletic. And yes, he certainly can play guard, but I think he certainly can give you that tackle play as well. And when you start talking about versatility, that's massive. When you're trying to build a deep offensive line for this Florida Gators program, you look back at 2023, it wasn't deep enough. And there were guys that just weren't really versatile. You were kind of forced to play some guys at tackle that you certainly did not want to play at tackle. I think Solomon Thomas can give you really good tackle reps, can give you really good guard reps, a guy that there's a reason he's a consensus top 30 player in this country. Really big fan of Solomon Thomas. Again, a guy that fits what Billy Napier wants to do. I don't know if any of these names that we talked about will be committing coming out of this Florida Gators recruiting, or I should say visit weekend. That being said, you can start to see Billy Napier start fostering these relationships on the recruiting trail. That always pays off in the months of November and December. If we do any commitments, you guys know we'll be breaking them down, getting into the film. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.